In this episode, we take a look at creatine and its growing use, not just by athletes, but by people generally, particularly in light of a recent claim by Darryn Peterson, a college basketball star and top NBA prospect, who suggested that taking creatine caused him major physical issues this past basketball season. Hello, welcome to the Call Like I See It podcast. I'm James Keys, and joining me today is a man whose takes are really for the whole world. Tunde Ogunlana. Tunde, are you ready to show him why you're always moving cool?
Yeah, man. I'll see if I can make the world go round.
All right, here we go. Let's see if you can do it. All right, but before we get started, if you enjoy the show, I ask that you subscribe and like the show on YouTube or your podcast app. Doing so really helps the show out. Now, we're recording on May 12th, 2026. And Tunde, over the past few years, we've seen many discussions touting the benefits of creatine, which is a dietary supplement that's generally available. You don't need a prescription or anything. You can go to the store and get it. And these claims, recent claims, have touted how it's beneficial for strength, but also for the brain and other systems in the body. That creatine supplementation can be something not just for bodybuilders or athletes, as it has been for decades, but for anyone. And so looking at that, creatine usage has increased. But over a couple of days ago, we saw this story about Darren Peterson. And, he did an interview with ESPN. And this is a college basketball star this past year. It was his first year. He was a freshman in college. He's going, to the NBA. Generally with the NBA, you have to wait 1 year after high school, before you can go to the NBA. And so he's 1 year in college. And this guy's a top level basketball prospect, but he had issues this year with muscle cramping, and it was really unexplained during the season. And he is claiming recently that when he started taking creatine for the first time, which he did in this first year in college, the result of that was he had painful muscle cramps that would appear and show up, and even to the extent of a full body cramp he had at the beginning of the season. So, and that this hurt his basketball performance this year. So, looking at just first at the claims of Peterson before we get to the discussion on creatine in general, what stood out to you, Tunde, about the idea that Peterson saying taking creatine was causing these really crazy muscle cramps, and then that was hindering his performance?
It's interesting. I think that I'm not surprised, understanding that with any supplement, if it is used either overused or used in a way that the body is not prepared for, it can cause these outcomes. And as someone who played college basketball myself in the late 90s, back then, creatine was also popular. I remember that, I had some teammates and myself, we took it. And I remember our trainer telling us that if we're going to take it, we need to be very careful, because it can not only help to cause dehydration, but also it could ruin our kidneys. Too much creatine without the flushing that hydration can provide for the kidneys. And one thing that I stood out for me from the article that about the young man is that it was noted that once he went to the hospital with the initial body cramp that really debilitated
full
him.
Body cramp, yeah.
They discovered, after I guess running tests on him, that he already had elevated levels of creatine and things in his body already.
Well, no, that's what they discovered more recently. That's what the basis of this claim is that when he went to the hospital initially, they didn't know, but when he cut off creatine and then 2 weeks later got tested at the hospital this past month or after the season, is when they learned that he had a high baseline level of creatine.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. Making sure it's
I just want to make sure that it's clear in the thing. Yeah.
But the point remains the same, that the idea that it's a hard way to learn that he didn't need a supplement, right?
Yeah,
in that specific
right
supplement. Yeah. And the idea of a supplement is to supplement something that maybe you're deficient in. So I think the whole point, I guess, and I'll hand it back, is just we probably need to do a better job as consumers, first learning about our individual body. What do we each have going on, which does take knowing a doctor and going through the system a bit and all that, getting tests, to then find out what are you deficient in. So then maybe what supplements actually you may need, versus having your friends tell you, which is common in college, or today, which we didn't have in the late 90s when I was in school, maybe I would have been told by Instagram or TikTok about what to put in my body. And again, is that the smartest way to approach it?
I mean, I would think that, one, I think you landed on the key piece there, is that if it's a dietary supplement and you determine that you're not deficient, that you have a high baseline level of something, then if you supplement with that, you seem to be setting yourself up for failure. Now, this wasn't directly said, but the insinuation to me in that, oh, I'd never taken this before I got to college. And, this is part of when he went to college. He had friends before he went to college. And this is somebody whose body is setting himself up to try to make tens of millions of dollars over the year. I don't think this is something he gets off of Instagram. This sounded to me like it's like, okay, here at Kansas, our weight program, this is what we want you to do. This is the regimen. Now, this I don't know, but it sounds like, okay, here's the regiment that we have our athletes on. We want you on this regiment. And so he starts doing this regiment, possibly by trainers and stuff. But like you pointed out, that there's no testing there to say, are you deficient? It's like there's this assumption, which is made generally when you hear about creatine, everybody's deficient in this. Everybody is probably deficient in this. So everybody can stand to supplement it, because this is something that your body makes on its own. And it just makes a certain amount. And they say, okay, your body makes about one gram a day, but optimally you have 5 grams a day. And it's like, well, what if his body's making 4 or 5 grams a day on its own? Then supplementing it could actually be an overdose because his body's already doing it. So to me, that's what really stood out about this, is that even if you feel like you're under the care of a trainer or something like that, that you have to be careful, because all of these things are meant to supplement where you are right now. But if you don't know where you are right now, then you might be setting yourself up for failure. And the only way to know, and I say this from like personal experience, you have to listen to your body, or you get tested beforehand. And if you don't get tested beforehand, then you listen to your body. I'm a person that cannot take creatine. First time I took it was in college, and it created discomfort for me. And it was like a couple weeks, I'm like, oh man, I don't feel right. I work out a lot. I don't feel right, taking this. So I'll stop. Then 10 years later, it's like, oh, well, maybe, I was drinking too much or something in college. Let me try it again. And the same thing happened. And it was like, oh man. So clearly I just can't take creatine, because every time I take it, couple weeks later, I start feeling a little off. My muscles start feeling a little funny. My insides, my organs start feeling a little funny. It's like, all right, so listening to my body, I didn't have to get tested. I was just like, oh, when I supplement this, even within the guidelines, it doesn't work for me. So part of that, I mean, now in this case, it could be hard for somebody like this to identify, okay, it's the creatine that did this to me. But, he started doing something right before the college year, and then he starts having these problems. You got to start eliminating things sooner, ideally, than the end of the season to try to figure that out.
Yeah. I think this is also, in the greater look at it, it's also the downside of, I think, part of our culture, a little bit of this need to kind of always find some edge, be on the bleeding edge of the competitive landscape, because, he just had to be better than the next guy, from his body and all that. And this kind of,
hey man, that's the Mamba mentality, man. That's what we are.
No, I get it, but that's what I mean. It's kind of a conditioning that we have that, because what I was thinking when I was reading it too is a couple like real things, and thinking back to my own life when I played college basketball. Number one is, you're 18, 19 years old, 20 years or whatever, it's kind of college age. Number one, you're, a rare person, because I remember I didn't know how to listen to my body at that age, right? Like, meaning I understood when I blew out my ACL, it hurt and it was bad, right? Like I got that. But the idea of these little kind of things internally and all that, based on my memory, dude, and I'll be honest, right? I was partying on the weekends in college, drinking, smoking weed. I was in the dorms hanging out. So, like the ability for me to be like the age I am now, where I can feel certain things and all that. And like, okay, shoot, I need to go to the doctor, or let me look this up. That wasn't there when I was that age. The other thing is, I remember being an NCAA athlete, especially during the season and all that, because they got rules of when you can and can't work out. I mean, when you're working out. We were doing weights 6 days a week. I am 6'4". I at 48 now weigh 195 pounds roughly. Back when I was 20, I was 218 pounds with 8% body fat. I mean, they had us like literally horses. And then on top of that, as a basketball player, it's like one of the most athletic things you can do, because you're constantly running. There's no switching teams from offense to defense like baseball and football. And then the conditioning in preseason. I mean, you're running suicide sprints. We were running 5 mile. Like, you're constantly on the go. And so that's what I'm saying. It's understandable that if you are already conditioning a body like that, and then you just throw in there something like creatine, that could throw that body off. And so what I'm saying, it goes back to, I guess, what we're saying is, maybe as a world-class athlete at that age, right? Not as a 30-year-old or 35-year-old, or maybe someone like LeBron at 41 who's still a world-class athlete. But at 18, 19, maybe you don't need all this extra stuff. And that's what I meant when I came in and said, it's another, like, oh, the creatine, you need this, you need that. And it's like, actually, no, maybe this kid needs to be left alone and just lift weights and work out and play basketball.
But isn't that playing the result? Because every other Kansas athlete takes it and is better for it. And so he's the small
I don't know.
percent.
This is a good lesson, because here's an example.
But that's what I'm saying, though. Like creatine,
yeah.
and we can keep the conversation moving, because I do want to talk creatine more generally. But the whole point is that creatine, amongst supplements, is one of the more studied and established to be safe supplements there are out there, period. And so you have these outlier cases where it's like, hey, maybe you high-level athletes shouldn't be taking ephedra, which, like, that was another thing that people did when I was in college, but it got outlawed. But maybe not. But something like creatine would seem to be the kind of thing. It's like, hey, yeah, you can do protein powders, you can do creatines. Let's do just the safe stuff. But this is one of these outlier instances, which I can relate to, because I experienced, not to this extent that he did, but I did. I mean, lucky for me, and when I was in college, I did listen to my body when that stuff was, when I was feeling off, taking it 2 weeks later or whatever. But these are outlier incidents. And so the question really isn't, should nobody do it because 0.01% of people are going to have some problem? It's just, if you're in that 0.01%, you better try to identify that as quickly as possible. And however that can be.
I'm just smiling because I'm thinking, you're about to have me asking, well, should we think about vaccines the same way? But that's a whole different conversation.
Well, but it is part of the same, it swims in the same conversation.
That's why. Not to get on a tangent at all about that, but no, because this is a good topic. And that's why I want to ask you a question, because you're much more dialed in on this topic in your life than me. That's why I appreciate that you wanted to do this topic, because for the audience, I mean, as James mentioned, he's been experimenting with these in college. I tried creatine. I probably tried it for a month, and that was it when I was in college. But lately, this year in 2026, I've actually, for the first time, organically just started taking some supplements for my own, just aging in my body. So that's what I wanted to ask you, like, because historically, this has been something, creatine specifically, for bodybuilders, weightlifters, athletes. Lately, one of the reasons why I got interested in revisiting creatine was learning that it can help with brain function and memory and certain things like that. So, and as I'm getting older, and it's interesting, I started taking a statin.
We're starting to feel the need to supplement those things.
No, but that's the thing with my statin, it doesn't allow my body to synthesize as much CoQ10, which also affects memory. So I'm on a CoQ10 supplement. So when I heard that about creatine, to me, it was very interesting. So wanted to know, like, just your opinion on that in general. And then, do you think that when we hear things like about this kid in Kansas, these negative side effects, do you think that, this stuff is really something we should pursue and all that? Or do you think it's a little bit more hype, looking at the fact that there are these side effects, even if it is for the 0.01 or 0.1%?
Yeah. That's the tough piece. No, that's the tough piece when you live in a society with a lot of people and everybody's coming from a different place, so to speak. Like, none of our bodies are identical. And so if creatine is again, established to be one of the more safe and effective supplements out there, and like, I tried it when I was 20 and it didn't work for me, but it's not like I didn't do anything. Like, I've done protein powders or different fish oils and all that types of stuff. I've been doing that stuff for 25 years, and trying different things, seeing how it makes me feel. And then if I like it, I'll, keep it in or don't, and stuff like that. So I've experimented with this stuff a lot, these type of dietary supplements, trying to find, the right kinds and things like that, learning about what it does, so I think it has a place. But the problem is that with the hype, you're looking for you're trying to loop in the largest audiences possible and saying, hey, this creatine's been being used for a long time, decades but it's been bodybuilders, it's been athletes and stuff like that. And people who are generally speaking paying close attention to their body. They're trying to get maximum performance out. So now it's like, oh, no. Actually, even if you don't want maximum performance out of your body, creatine can be great for you, like you said, for brain function, for all these other things, which I'm sure is true. But when you, again, the bigger loop that you put around and say, hey, we want more and more people to do this stuff, the more of that 0.1% or whatever, which is a number I'm just throwing out there, but it's some small percentage of people that is within the sample size of them saying, hey, this stuff is safe and effective. They're like, yeah, it's safe and effective. There have been anecdotal reports of muscle cramping or kidney problems, as if that means you're supposed to disregard that. And it's like, well, no, that doesn't mean you're supposed to disregard that. That means if you're going to try this, you're at your own risk, one, and you better pay attention to whether or not you start having any of these side effects. Because if you take it and you start having these side effects, you're one of the unlucky ones that this affects. And so, and that is like you kind of threw in with a little jab, but just like that is the same kind of thing that we deal with from when you're looking at it, not on an individual level, but on a societal level, when we talk about vaccines, which vaccines would be qualified though, not as a dietary supplement, but as forced medication if it's going to be mandated by the state, which brings in a whole nother level of
conversation. Yeah.
When for that 0.1% or whoever, that are going to have some bad reaction. And it's like, well, the state's making me do something that's going to give me some bad reaction, versus if you do it voluntarily, you kind of just take your risk. So I don't think it undermines the hype, but hopefully it will increase awareness that, hey, yes, for the vast majority of people, this thing can be safe and effective. But for some of y'all, you better watch out because this thing might hurt you. And then you better stop as soon as you can so that your body can get back to normal.
Yeah, and I think, one thing I've learned to appreciate as I've gotten older is again, not to have such a suspicious way of viewing the healthcare system. And even like I joked about the vaccines and stuff like that. And obviously there's nuances that you've well pointed out about whether a state mandates it or not versus your own voluntary putting something in your body. So I know all that's very important. But I also feel like, we have a country of 330 or so, I keep hearing is the estimate of our population. So sometimes we do have to accept that it's like me taking my statin or certain things. And if it has a side effect, I try and tell myself, well, don't blame the entire system and all that. Just understand that, you might, like you're saying, I might be the part of the 5% that has a memory issue with I think 20% with a statin. And then I look up why and I find out, okay, so now I got to go take more CoQ10. And it's a choice because I can choose to stop taking the statin as well. Yeah. And I can probably get the results of the statin by changing my habits and my diet and all that. I just choose not to because I hate to say it, but I'm a little bit lazy. I don't want to get that discipline with my nutrition. So, but it's like, James, my point is, and I appreciate you laughing, but I'm kind of fired up and serious about it because I feel like part of our issue right now in our society is debating all these things. And we all are kind of so narcissistic, if I can say it that way. And I'd rather just be humble and to be honest and say, yeah, I probably could avoid taking a pharmaceutical drug, but I don't feel like putting that discipline in my life right now because I got other things in my life that need to be more disciplined as well. And I need a bit of an outlet. And right now for me, eating a certain way makes me feel good. So I can wrestle with that kind of stuff. But for some people, they'll say, whether it's the vaccine or the supplement or anything else in healthcare, so I don't want to pick on it, they'll look at, well, because it affects 0.5% of the population, now there's this whole conspiracy theory created. And it's like, actually, no, don't look at all that stuff. Why don't you focus on learning your own healthcare and how some of this stuff relates to you? And one of the things I just wanted to be, I know we're going to kind of close it out here soon, but I want
to respond to that though. So go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, man.
Oh, okay. Well, I think.
Yeah, I got one more and then I know we're going to close out, but go ahead.
Well, the thing is I think that I laugh because it's an honest assessment. And that's what I think is missing more than anything is that you have a role in this. You're not just being acted on. Again, that's one thing that people like to do is to avoid responsibility for their own life is to say, I'm being acted on. This is what's happening to me and not focusing on the part of it that they can control and say, hey, okay, this is the part that I'm going to make a decision here, and it's not going to be an easy decision. There's going to be a trade-off either way. And so you just outwardly and openly acknowledge the trade-off that you're willing to take. And I find that's respectable. It's funny to hear it because it's like, okay, yeah, hey, I'm not going to make this sacrifice. So I'll take this risk and then I'll try to mitigate that risk. That's an adult way to view it, and other people might look at the same circumstance and say, you know what? I don't want to take that risk. I'm going to try to do this other thing that will require more effort than what you say. You're saying, I don't want to do that extra effort, but it also might require more discipline. You might say, hey, I don't know that I want to even set myself up to not have the discipline and then fail. So there are a lot of everything doesn't have to be for everybody, And so in this instance, whether we're talking about creatine, whether we're talking about like medicine and things like that, what you have to do is look at these situations as an adult and decide, okay, well, I want this approach. There's nothing's 100%. Okay, this approach has a 5% chance of something going wrong in this way. I can try to mitigate that a little bit here, which is what you did. Somebody else might go the other way. So I think that a lot of times, though, the aversion is that people say, oh, well, this is just happening to me. And so I'm not going to say, okay, well, I'm going to actually take this in my hands. So that I think it's funny. It sounds funny when you start talking about that, but it's not. I commend you actually for that. But there's one piece I want us to get to before we get out though, and that's at how readily available supplements are in general. There's debates, that go on as far as, you had that Supplement Act from the early to mid 90s that made supplements generally available. You don't have to get a prescription for things like that. Most supplements can be sold freely, same way as you can sell a box of macaroni and cheese or something. You can go buy some creatine or whatever. Do you think that because a lot of supplements, if they're doing what they're supposed to do, they all have effects on the body? Do you think that this is a regulation issue? Like, is there something from a societal standpoint or a state standpoint that should be in a barrier in the way to prevent something like what happened to Peterson, or, generally, or is our current setup sufficient to deal with these types of risks and to let people make these decisions? Or do you think that the state should have a bigger role in this?
I'll answer your question after I get through the astonishing amazement that there may actually be a potential for a macaroni and cheese supplement. I want to revisit that with you in a later discussion.
I'm saying you can I can go to the store and buy some creatine and some macaroni and cheese.
Because we're having a discussion about this and you said mac and cheese. Now I'm just thinking about,
now you're hungry.
Put that in can they put it in a pill, or can they crush it into a powder, or I can either put it in my drink and snort it, or whatever I want to do with it. Oh my goodness, man. And get my mac and cheese the quick and fast way, so. Let's see this. And you're a patent attorney, so we may have a whole conversation offline. I might be hiring you as
we might have to. So an improved delivery method.
When I become a billionaire and no longer join you on this show because I'm too busy and all that, then the audience will know that it worked out. But then to get back to seriousness here, so I think that. So this will be one where you'll be surprised. I'll actually say I don't think we need additional regulation on this one.
Why would I be surprised about that?
Because I'm always saying we need to regulate something.
You feel like you're always saying that. I don't think you're always saying that, but go ahead.
I think it's because the topics we generally bring it up on, when it's financial stuff or poly markets and trading. Yeah.
Selection.
So I think it is selection bias. So this one I don't think so. That's what I was going to say. I was going to say I think it needs to be regulated like mac and cheese in a serious way. Meaning, I think the companies that produce supplements need to be regulated, right? We need to make sure that they're doing it safely and safe factories and all that.
I think that what's in there is what they say is what's in there.
That's what I was going to say. We need to make sure we're not just buying sawdust or a placebo, right? We want to make sure that the products, that they get reprimanded if they're found to be not selling us what they're telling us they're selling us. So from that standpoint, I think like any consumer product, the regulatory environment is already there and needs to stay robust. But I don't think we need to do new healthcare regulations, or that some of these things need to be prescribed and all that. Because I do think this comes down to, and you kind of said it in your windup of your question, that there's this kind of weird dynamic that this does. This is a true quasi the person and quasi the system, right? To me, the system part of it, where the regulations are necessary, what we just said, to make sure that when I go to the store, that whatever's on the shelf that I'm buying or I'm buying from Amazon is in itself safe. That should always be part of regular consumer regulations.
Well, but after that, safe is a loaded word though, because safe, some people can take something and it's unsafe for them.
Well, Peterson, let me be very clear to not be
exactly. You should.
What I mean is that the machines that are used, to make the pills go in the bottle aren't, giving trace amounts of arsenic from the metal into the.
There we go.
That's what I mean by safe.
Yeah,
it's just it's this idea that that's why I meant like similar to the macaroni and cheese. We just want to make sure that if we put it in our body, it's not going to kill us immediately and all that. So
because of some contamination or some kind of
correct, yeah. So that's really my point, and so that's what I was going to say is just the alternative then is this kind of. The human beings do have to be, responsible themselves for asking questions. I do think that we've identified here there's a difference between this guy at 18-year-old who's a freshman in Kansas and me at 48 who's 30 years older than him that has had enough life experience now that I do ask questions before people try and give me stuff and put stuff in my body. And I appreciate an 18-year-old kid is just going to do whatever the trainers say. So that's also part of it. We have to acknowledge that we're all sharing this existence at the same time, but not all of us are in the same place. So some of us will fall through the cracks and won't ask questions and all that. And that's just part of the kind of a large society in the journey. And then the last thing I'll say, James, and then I know we want to wrap it up. And
let me. I got something. You said too.
Yeah, no, it's just that you said something as you wound up this question, which is the abundance of them. And I'm reminded that in my research for just this discussion, I started looking at stuff that was telling me the history of supplements. And it's interesting that we know that there's things like ginseng, green tea, ginger, used by the Chinese, the Greeks, the ancient Egyptians. So supplement, when you say abundance, it reminded me that really supplements are just what's already out there in nature. Now, today we take a pill maybe for ginger or ginseng to make it easier. But at the end of the day, this is what human beings have been foraging and gathering forever. And so, yeah.
Some are, but some aren't. Like creatine isn't something like that. That's not some root that's been ground up, like that. Like, so some supplements are like even protein.
But that's
powders.
A supplement that human beings may not have needed before this modern world and this ability of trying to be a hyper athlete.
That's a chemistry thing. That's not a biology thing. That's not something that somebody got out of nature. Like it's both.
But I'm talking more conceptually, James, that the idea that people understood that there's plants and things in nature that could supplement their health, other area, make them better or cure this or that. The idea of tea is just putting herbs in hot water, letting it boil, and it's a supplement, right?
Well, let me jump in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I think that I agree with you on this. And now I probably do lean a little bit more away from regulation than you do. Generally speaking, I'm always looking at the incentives and so forth. But in this instance, I think that the regulation is about where it should be. What we need to be able to do is to get enough information for people to be able to evaluate risk. I don't think that the government should hold your hand on every decision that you make. So once you're 18, even if you're an 18-year-old, there are plenty of responsible 18-year-olds. Like just because there's some irresponsible 18-year-olds doesn't mean that an 18-year-old shouldn't be able to make the decision and do it or not do it. And so I don't think this for reasons like this is within the realm of what is creatine's advertised about. It's advertised that, hey, it's safe and effective based on the standards, which is it's not 100%. it's 90 something percent, 99% or whatever it is, that most people will experience no problem and be able to get a benefit. But that does not mean that everybody will, or that everybody won't have a detriment and everybody will experience the benefit, because we're all coming from different places. So as long as we can evaluate what those risks are, like what was very valuable for me, for example, even going back, like I said, when I was 20, was when I started taking it, to look at what I need to watch out for and say, okay, well, if this works for me, this is what's going to happen. If it doesn't, I might start feeling this or I might start feeling that. And once I was able to see, okay, I started feeling this, then I know I hit eject. And again, like I said, I tried again, 10 or 15 years after that, because I was like, maybe I lived a certain way then that would make it so that I couldn't do it. And I tried again, gave it a couple of weeks, and I was like, no, this is the same thing that came back the last time. So it was like, I need to be able to evaluate the risk. That's a free society. I'm free to make a mistake. I'm free to do something that can harm me, but I at least want to be able to evaluate if I'm doing something that's harming me. It shouldn't sneak up on me with respect to the available information. So that's as far as I can go with it, because again, you can't regulate out any possibility of any negative outcomes, not only because that's impossible, but also because that's not a free society anymore. And I do value the idea of a free society, and the people who want to put regulation on this stuff, they just want to control it, and then we go down a funny road when people start wanting to control stuff. The incentives start to change, as we see with pharmaceuticals and the way they're treated, nowadays, so yeah, I think we're actually in a good place. We're in the kind of place that you should be with something like this. And, I'm happy that we're here, so to speak. And whatever, like isolated incidents like this, though, are going to be a cost of doing business in that context. So, but no, I think
I'm happy. I'm happy to learn that the James from like 20 years ago and the James from today, when he tried two different things.
No,
tried the James thing before.
Twice.
Sorry. Yeah. The same thing at two different points in life. And it had the same result, tells us that his body is the same. But I know my boy, before his wife and kids, was definitely a much different person. I would even dare to say a wow. But
well,
so
my
at least
body
we know
with
that
respect to
the
creatine
supplements
was the same. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. So the supplements, nothing's changed on that, Mark, but a lot of the other things have changed.
Yeah, a lot else
for 20 years.
A lot else. So, but no, that I can't deny that. So, but we appreciate everybody for joining us on this episode of Call Like I See It. Subscribe to the podcast, rate it, review it, tell us what you think, send it to a friend. Till next time, I'm James Keys.
Tunde Ogunlana.
All right, we'll talk soon.